And welcome back to Great Scott and Marcus here on Ramble Entertainment. We're in another Ramble TV of the season. Mark, we kind of got into this with last week's Hype Train, and I kind of thought about expanding on this. And part of me is also curious, did you watch the most recent Walking Dead?
Yes.
Okay, so for those who don't know, I don't care about the show. I've watched it, and it just didn't connect with me, and So this will also be partially spoiler-ish, so I will put a graphic above us. So what'd you think of what happened? Because I did read on it, and I do have some comments about that.
I mean, it was a very, very intense episode. I was sitting there watching it and kind of holding myself, like, going, oh my god, and, like, sitting
oh my god.
in my chair, like,
oh my god,
kind of, like, just really intensely, just paying attention. I don't know how to describe
So
it.
again,
It was a really intense show.
I'm going to put a spoilers thing above us right here, and when it's gone, the spoilers will have ended.
So I'm able to get
Glenn
into detail
died.
now. Yes, and Abraham died.
I don't know who Abraham is.
Abraham was he was a guy they ended up running into later on. I forget which season it was, maybe 3 or 4. I could be completely wrong. It seemed like the last season he really kind of warmed up to the audience. It seemed like, a lot more people were like on Abraham's side. At first, he's kind of a callous asshole. You didn't really like him, and now he's like, all right, he's really kind of personable. And then he actually died first, which I feel like that wasn't very. It wasn't as surprising, but the way Glenn died, which was kind of because Daryl lashed out against Negan. Negan's the bad guy. Daryl's one of the good guys, and Negan's like, "I told you, no circumstances," and just turned around and killed Glenn, which was shocking and kind of brutally gross.
So here's why I really don't connect with shows like this. For me, when you're telling a story and there are characters that have a long and I get it, people. So like for me, I just find that a wrong choice in storytelling. I think that people might get sick of campiness all the time, and want, a bit more unpredictability, which is why they might attach themselves to Game of Thrones or The Walking Dead. For me, I know that that's not what I want.
Right.
It's not that I want 100% campiness all the time. So not to spoil too much, so like from here we will remove spoilers, but not to spoil too much for anybody who might want to watch Dark Matter, which is kind of a bit of a goofy teen-ish sci-fi, but one of, say, the popular one of the show headliners dies, and it was shocking, and yet at the same time they didn't go overboard with it. And that's I love it when things can at least be metered, where it's just like, this is a story about more than just like the randomness of life or the callous nature of circumstances. And that's my problem. And this ramble isn't gonna be all about that, but that was on my mind this week. Like, everybody was talking about it, and I couldn't help but just spoil it for myself because I have no intention of watching the show. And like, when I heard that, I was just like, but they could have simply been the happy ending to however that show turns out.
I think they just renewed for like an 8th season too, so who knows how long this is going to last. But I think we've talked about this before. Like, I'm kind of in the boat where it's like it's getting redundant, but I have become attached to it. And I think
that's also another reason why I couldn't help but not attach to it, because I heard that there is no overarching plot in The Walking Dead, and I was just like, are you fucking kidding?
Like, basically the idea is just survival. And
that's you need a better driving force than that,
right?
I think they're starting to see that in numbers too.
Probably, and I know like Negan was a big character in the comics, so of course they kind of had to get to that. But it's kind of similar to how do I say this? Um, I'm thinking about Batman series, like the Christian Bale, like the Dark Knight Rises. You know, he had this enemy, like he had other enemies, which kind of wait, I'm trying to think of like Bane was a different kind of enemy. You know, it like really kind of broke him down physically, which you know, like the Joker and Scarecrow was like kind of mentally. Whereas like I think a lot of these characters,
physically, yeah,
these enemies in The Walking Dead or nemesises, whatever you want to call them. Antagonists, great word, thank you. In The Walking Dead, they kind of perceive a different persona of the antithesis, I guess.
Antithesis,
yeah.
Basically, yeah, they try to personify the opposite of
and basically
the characters trying to morally survive and sustain themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what Negan's doing, which is kind of necessary to keep it from being redundant from the previous antagonists, is that it kind of really broke down their group, but really broke down the main character to where he is no longer the leader, like mentally or physically. Like he is just out of it, and now he has to answer to somebody else for the very first time in the entire series, which kind of keeps it a little interesting. But again, I can't help but think that, well, given the past 5 or 6 seasons, like they're gonna rise above this, and then it's just gonna keep repeating itself. But granted, I'm hooked.
Yeah, this repetition of like X character dies and then group rises above and moves on and then tries to establish life, and then Y protagonist or antagonist interrupts trying to establish life, and it's when you don't have a progressive plot, you don't move forward. And when you don't have persistent protagonists and antagonists, things don't really move forward, because it's always this question of, are they gonna die? When are they gonna die? That's
like my problem with sitcoms in general, though, too. Like it's just this notion of standing still. There's no long-term outcomes. Everything.
Yeah, but
is
a sitcom's objective is different. A sitcom is meant to be comedic. The Walking Dead is not a sitcom.
Yeah, I get that. I just look at like some of these shows online or not online, like Big Bang Theory, for example. It's just like you can watch episode 1, season 1, or watch an episode that just aired last week, and you're like, oh, it's literally the exact same stuff happening.
So like the difference is where like The Walking Dead is a character-driven show. So like Big Bang is kind of, by my interpretation, I've never really watched much of it. I've caught like glimpses of episodes, but my interpretation of it is that it's like House. Each episode is kind of like about solving an objective, but then eventually it becomes about character arcs over time, as opposed to just like about like these roommates solving issues about living together, or this doctor solving difficult cases. And really it's about finding what's fascinating for each viewer underneath all that for those shows. So like for Sunny, it's hilarious because they're basically sociopaths, and it's about finding where people connect, and if you don't connect to Big Bang Theory, obviously you don't understand it, and that's because you don't connect. But so moving into the actual like rambleness of this topic, so like for me, fall is a great time for TV, and we kind of touched on this in Hype Train. And I'll often revisit Supernatural because it really gets you in that sense of fall and seasons changing because of the weather. They're driving all over the Midwest and solving supernatural occurrences, for those who don't know what supernatural is. But again, there's kind of another example of what I like by contrast of these shows that I've had so much trouble trying to connect with, where it's like people die along the way. And again, not to spoil too much, we're in a non-spoilers section, but the main characters continue to persist at the very least because the story is about them, and even though there's a lot of loss around them, that it's still about them. It's still about them. Whereas like even with your Game of Thrones or your Walking Dead, for me the problem is just like even like your main character like can be in question if they are going to live or die. And yeah, that's problematic for me. But moving on from that, like, fuck, what am I pumped for? So like, typically there's a Marvel series right about now on Netflix, and we've talked about how Marvel's just fucking overdoing it, but on Netflix they are doing really well with their Marvel series. I've been impressed with all three: Luke Cage, Daredevil, and Jessica Jones, and I have watched all of them in their entireties, and there should be even another one coming out right about now, and it's exciting. It's exciting to just enjoy this, season of TV where shows that have ended their seasons are coming out onto Netflix, or Netflix is coming out with new series, or just kind of the broader question of what are your fall shows, like what connects you with fall, what might you revisit because it's fall.
It's hard to say, man. I actually got on Netflix yesterday for the first time in a while, and usually when I'm in the morning getting ready, or on the weekends, making breakfast, eating breakfast, cleaning breakfast, I always got a movie on.
Cleaning breakfast,
cleaning up after my breakfast, whatever. And went to my usual Pulp Fiction, but I got into Netflix and I looked at the new releases, and holy shit, like there is so much that they're adding. It's overwhelming, for lack of better words. It's just like
I think they're trying to emphasize that more too, though.
Yeah, like it's they need to. I think Netflix needs to have like a section in Netflix where it can be like, okay, here's original content that we're producing, and then subdivide it into like TV shows, movies, 1 hour specials. There's just so much.
Don't they have a tab for that? Or
I don't know. Maybe on the web version they do. This was on my Apple TV, but it was like, Jesus Christ. And I went through like the shows. There's got to be at least 6 or 8 new shows that are now launching. And
I think a lot of their Netflix originals don't always land like a lot of the big ones do.
They land differently in different areas of the world too. Like what might land over here might not land over in Europe or wherever else.
Peaky Blinders does a lot better in Europe because it's also a part of BBC. Obviously, the House of Cards does better here because it's our politics. Yeah,
and same with Amazon too. Amazon it's not quite as oversaturated as Netflix, so it's actually really hard for me to say which shows I'm excited for this fall. Besides, obviously, Walking Dead, I'm into that.
That's definitely also part of fall, where it's just like there is too much TV, especially for someone who is very socially involved. Doesn't just come home and always turn a show on. You're just like, oh, I gotta go see
like
X
3
friend
nights of the week. I'm like not home. Daredevil's been on my list. Stranger Things been on my list. I heard about Black Mirror. That's on my list. I can't believe
you haven't seen Stranger Things,
dude. I'm way behind.
Black Mirror is starting to ping on my radar basically, because I'm definitely hearing a lot about that, and it has 3 seasons, so it's not just like, oh, it's 1 season, and kind of like what's that? What was that popular detective show? And then the second season supposedly sucked. True Detective, and then also
you're halfway there when you said popular detective show. Popular Detective? Close. Not really.
Yeah, like so like it's not like True Detective or Mr. Robot, where it's just like the first season is supposedly awesome, and now what I'm hearing for both of their second seasons is that they kind of aren't as awesome.
But with True Detective, apparently HBO put a lot of stress on the writers and directors to get the story out in a set time. And they've even admitted this, like on both sides of the spectrum, HBO and the writers, and they weren't happy with the outcome, obviously, and the ratings were not good. So I think there might be another season of that, but they're pretty much going to tell the creators, like, hey, take your time.
But yeah, it's just like this could be a bit more metered, especially going into like the latter half of winter, January going on, because that's where people really kind of shut themselves in and then look back on those releases. And I can't help but wonder if just half or even 1/3 of those releases could just be released after January, because it still seems like between January and March there are less like, here's a new show, here's a new show, here's, you know, a season that just got added, another season that just got added. So it's just like, yeah,
now it's become a hard balance for me now too, between like Netflix and Amazon too, and ugh.
Well, definitely to wrap this up, but to go a bit more off topic with this, so this is also a thing that people talk about with games, backlogs. That's the word I'm looking for. Like gaming backlogs, TV and movie backlogs. Like I think. To me personally, my interpretation of it is like, if something has sat in your backlog for X amount of time, abandon it. Like, unless you truly intend to like watch something or play something, like there's new stuff that's going to be coming out. Like, if you're not getting to it, you're not going to get to it.
I just need to take a week off work and just sit and watch every fucking movie on my queue right now.
Like, yeah, I just personally feel like backlogs are kind of like dumb, but and maybe that's a lack of understanding on my part, but go ahead.
To me, because I've got a fairly extensive backlog. You know, it's a matter of like, hey, this interested me and I'd like to get to it, but it's often hard for me to, you know, as you said, you know, like working 45 hours and like I'm going out, like, and let's say 3 days of the week or 4 days of the week that I am home after work. Sometimes there's movies that I'm like, I'm not in the mood for it, or I'm only in a certain mood, and typically I always like turn on something I've already watched. I'm like, hey, I haven't seen that in a while. Like, I think last week I watched Brick. So I was just like, I haven't seen that in a long time. But, like, I could have watched one of my backlogged movies.
Well, there's also like, there's also like passive shit where it's just like, I can turn on Supernatural again because I've seen it enough. I know what's happening. So like, it doesn't have to be the forefront of my attention. Right. Instead, I can play a game, I can edit videos while Supernatural is just on. And then it's also easy to just like then enter into a new season with it, because it's just like, I know most of what's going on. I know the characters, you know, like, and if I need to watch that new season again, fine. You know, that's no problem. And I do feel like, you know, this mentality of like having backlogs and stuff is just like a bit overwrought. Like, I could easily say like True Detective or Mr. Robot are in my backlog, but to be honest, they're not even on my radar because they don't have enough seasons, and we don't actually know how both of them are going to turn out. You know, it's just like they could actually have bad third seasons each, and then end in fourth seasons that don't really fulfill the same sense that their first seasons did again. And then it's just like, oh, okay, well then I didn't miss much.
Right.
So,
well, True Detective, it's kind of like American Horror Story.
The
seasons are unrelated. So I mean, you can still watch season 1, which I'd recommend it, and you don't need to watch season 2 because season 1 it starts and begins and wraps it all up all in that one season. So if you ever find it,
but at the same time, like even when you're telling separate stories season to season, if you have multiple seasons that people just aren't connecting with, it's just like, then you know that's something to keep in mind. And whether you want to put it on your backlog or not, it definitely lowers it on my list.
Sure.
So, yeah. So let's go ahead and move into the topic for this week.
Alrighty.